Thank you for staying tuned to Newsmaker Live with Laura. If it's Wednesday, it's Newsmaker Live, where we make your story our story. My guest this evening is Mrs. Flavia Sherry, and we've been talking about abuse and rape for the most part. And, you know, we've been focused a little bit on rape, but there are so many other forms of abuse and violence perpetrated against women. Before we go back to Mrs. Sherry, let's hear from Mrs. Berthia Paul, who incidentally was the person who read the declaration at today's march. Let's hear her thoughts.
It means a lot to me because I think, you know, we've been talking, we've been expressing our concerns, we've been saying how we feel about it, but we haven't really done anything necessarily to show our support for these women who have been victimized or raped. And I think it's a lot more than we actually know, because a lot of women feel very ashamed about it and don't come out and really tell people they have been raped. I know I wasn't raped, but I was attacked, a violent attack at my house, and I'm still living in fear from that night. So I can understand and I can relate to them. So it means a lot for me to be here today. And I'm saying it's non-political, it's just, you know, women expressing how they feel, that this really has to stop and we have to do something about it. So I feel very, very strongly about it, and that's why I'm here today. That is definitely something I know we are discussing it currently now, that we would like the Senate to adopt and possibly in the House. And I will be reading something at the march at the Derek Walker Square where we asking for certain things to be done. And I'm hoping that I can see that the government will, based on what they've said, ensure that these things are done and we can somehow begin to attack the problem. All right, you're welcome.
And this was Mrs. Paul talking about her thoughts on rape as a senator and primarily as a woman. And, you know, as she said, she hasn't been raped, but attacked violently, and still, years later, still very much in fear as a result of that incident. And what we're saying is this: violence against women has no respect for class and status and position. It could be perpetrated against anybody. And those of us who have been violated or been survivors or victims of violence and or rape, we are not alone. You are not alone. Even those of us who have not yet experienced, we feel your pain, we empathize with you. And there are those of us who would stop at nothing to ensure that your pain is eased. I know it's easier said than done, but there are people out there who want to help. But more importantly, who want to ensure that the coming generations of young women do not have to suffer this indignation, and that our women of yesteryear can continue to live a life free from fear that in their twilight years, that they too may be violated. I mean, what do you think about that last incident? And I know we were trying to talk about more than rape, but it just keeps coming back. It's like this bad penny. No matter how many times you throw it away, it keeps coming back. This 97-year-old grandmother.
A rape is a hate crime, Laura. There's no two ways about it. The rape has nothing really to do. It's not about sex. And that is why I think we need to put it into context. It's about power and control. And that is why I think as a society, everybody needs to get on board, including the whole society. Because sometimes as persons within the society, we see things happen. We see vulnerabilities. We see how young people are impacted and nothing is done. And all of this contributes to the situation that we are in now. That is why we need a holistic approach. I mean, just imagine a 97-year-old woman. This is not about sex. To rape and sodomize a 97-year-old woman, I mean, it takes a sick, perverted, twisted individual to perpetrate such an act against another human being.
We're going to open the lines in a few to take some questions. But before we do this, it's interesting that you say that, because a lot of the times people will say, oh, it's the way they dress. You don't see how she was dressed and whatever. But this was a grandmother. I couldn't imagine her dressing in any sexy lingerie.
And she was at her home.
And
Laura.
she's at her home. Let's hear from May Wayne, her thoughts on rape, and then we'll open the lines.
For me, it was very important to show that this affects all women. So it was important for She Magazine to come out and make a statement. This is not about a particular woman or a particular race or anything. It affects every single woman. So I encouraged, a lot of my girls who work with me to come and say what they have to, and march and make a statement that it affects all of us. Even though I have a fashion magazine, the impact is what we are as a woman. It's not about fashion or anything. It's an important voice that we need to have heard, and our issues need to be addressed. It has been too long that I think we've just accepted the status quo. So I'm hoping by, us coming out and making a statement saying that it affects every single woman, that we are here. I'm disappointed there are not more men here, because I think that's very, very important as well, that we have the men on board, because they need to be educated as well. But I just wanted to add my voice to that every woman's voice in St. Lucia that has been affected by this horrible, disgusting crime.
Now, people would say that some women look for it by the way we dress, by the, by our
Well, I definitely would disagree with that, which is why I am here, because I advocate for women to wear fashion. I advocate a woman being proud of her body and to care about her body. And I definitely don't advocate rape. We dress for ourselves, not for men to come and abuse us. So I think whoever says that is ignorant, which is why She Magazine is here to say we can be fashionable, gorgeous and sexy, but we are not encouraging any man to violate us. And that is wrong, and it's against the law, and we need to educate our people, and we also need the laws to support us and the courts to support us.
And there you have it. It isn't. It's like Mrs. Sherry has been saying. It really is not about the sex. It really is a hate crime. It really is a crime against humanity. It really is a crime solely about control. Now the lines are opened right now, so you can call in and join in the discourse. We have a few WhatsApp messages already. Imagine, this is one of the things that I have to try to do. But we have our first call online, and then we'll get into the WhatsApp message. Thank you for holding, and thank you for calling Newsmaker Live with Laura. You're on the air.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, when a crime like that happens, why the lawyer are taking it up and defending the person who commit this crime?
Thank you so much for your call. He's saying, when a crime like this is perpetrated, why are the lawyers taking up the case and defending the accused?
That is because every single human being is entitled to their human rights and is entitled to a defense. We live in a civilized society, and when you are accused, you have a right to defend yourself. And so you will always have attorneys who will be available to take up those cases. It's a matter of the society ensuring that the guilty are found guilty and those who are innocent are allowed to go free. Because not everybody who is accused is going to be
and there have been cases
guilty.
like that where people have falsely accused people. We're not advocating that because you're pissed off at somebody that you accuse them, and we're not saying that everybody who has been accused was falsely accused. Let us do the right thing. Accuse when a crime has been committed, and to refrain from ourselves becoming criminals. I have a WhatsApp message, and I think before we take any other calls, Junior, let me just go through this WhatsApp message, and because it's very heart-rending, and good night, Ms. Japia, and good night to your guest. I have had a few sleepless nights over this issue, hearing that a 12-year-old girl who lives with relatives because her mom is blind, this child has been said to be running away from her dwelling countless of times. To my understanding, at present, she has run away and is presently living in another area. As a mother, I am begging whomever has this child to please do the right thing. She needs help, and there are people who can help her. Please help her get a better future. I have actually heard about this little girl. She's 12 years old, she's sexually active, and she has been running away from her guardians. And every time she's found, she's been brought back to the same home. And somebody's harboring this child. Now, today has been a very emotional day for me. And this child is being harbored, and that's illegal. And if it is not illegal, it should be illegal. What I know, you have dealt with cases like this so many times. So many times. I cannot imagine any parent who would not feel for this little girl. And it's just abhorrent to think that somebody's hiding her and keeping her away from getting a better future, as this person has said, and having sex with her. She's 12 years old.
I think this is a classic example of the way we have some serious breakdowns in our society. And a case like that clearly needs to be referred to the Human Services Department. I think the most important thing that the person, the writer of this message, should do is to perhaps go in or even call, ask to speak to one of the social workers and give all the details that you possibly can, and ensure that something is done about this. Because I am certain that if this was a matter which was brought to the attention of the Human Services Department under the watch of Ms. Rissilis, that something could have been done by now. Because sometimes we assume that if we just tell the neighbor and tell somebody else, that something will be done. But we have to be our brothers and our sisters' keeper. And we cannot just tell the other people or spread the information around and not say to the authorities, the only persons who are charged with the responsibility to handle these cases are not informed. So my hope about this particular case is that this case does reach the attention of the Human Services Department and the police as well. And that the person who is harboring, because sometimes, you know, in situations like that, I've handled so many cases like that over the years, and what I've found too is usually you don't find just a normal 12-year-old behaving in this manner. This child must be so broken and so challenged in many ways because of her vulnerability, and we need to look at this in that kind of way and see what has caused that problem in the first place. Why is she running away? Is there an issue even there? And that is why the person's best place to be able to deal with this situation, to interview all the parties involved and to prosecute someone if in fact that person is harboring this 12-year-old child. Part of the reason why we are in this situation as a society is because we have been sooty-wise for so long. So many people know of things happening. They know of father abusing child. They know this is happening next door, and they just say nothing. They stay quiet. So we all have to take responsibility as a society for the place where we are at this point. We cannot get out of it by just naming and blaming everybody.
Yeah, but then I'm just getting follow-up that the case has actually been brought to Human Services. So there needs to be some sort of follow-up on that. So Human Services is aware, because I remember when I first heard, that was the first thing I asked.
Is that a very recent case?
It's ongoing.
And the child is still staying with...
The child is right now, recently, I think this week, run away, or was it last week, run away, and that child is somewhere else from where they're supposed to be residing, or from where she's supposed to be residing.
Well, as far as I know, this child obviously is way below the age of consent. And I know that there is a facility available at present for a child at that particular age. Because a child like that clearly cannot just be sent back home. There may be issues there too. And clearly from, in my limited understanding of this, there may be so many other things impinging on this particular case. So it needs to be thoroughly investigated. If it's in the hands of Human Services, I imagine at some point they're going to ensure that she is housed, because you need to take a child like that from this particular situation that she is in. She's running away for a reason. there are just so many issues. Before it gets totally out of hand, it needs to be addressed urgently. And I do hope that the investigations, if it is ongoing, I can probably use this opportunity to make an appeal to the Human Services Department. I know Mistress Elizabeth Lewis is a very committed individual, and if she's aware of it, she's going to do everything she can to ensure that something is done. And perhaps you can even follow up.
Oh, certainly.
Follow up. And
certainly.
that is the thing that we need to follow up.
Yes.
Ensure, check with the parents, assist even with vulnerabilities. You come across a family that is really struggling, sometimes you help out, because we always assume that we live in a perfect society. We don't. And a lot of people take advantage of those who are vulnerable. Yes. So as much as possible, we all can contribute to the reduction of vulnerabilities in our society.
This is your turn, St. Lucia, to join in the conversation, so you can continue to call and make your contributions. This is something that is very important. This is a topic that impinges on so many different facets and so many different lives. The life of one child, of a woman that has been abused, it just doesn't stop there. It's not just about the woman or the child. There are so many ripple effects that could happen. What are some of the situations you've encountered with children who, have been abused, and how it has affected family life?
Oh yes, it affects family lives in a myriad of ways, and that's why it's very important for the system to catch vulnerabilities and deal with them and provide the level of intervention that is necessary to save every single child. Because gender-based violence and increasing vulnerabilities, it reduces our ability to deal with the eradication of poverty. Because if a child is violated, or if a child is abused at a very young age, there's so many things that go on there. You destroy that child's life. That child is not prepared at all for that. And she then becomes vulnerable to other persons who are perverts. Because we are in small societies, and sometimes the word gets around. And then you have increasing poverty, because that child may end up getting pregnant way before the time. She may be so mentally and psychologically damaged by this that he or she may end up abusing drugs. That person could end up contracting HIV. And so it's a whole host of issues that need to be addressed, because if they are not addressed, eventually it affects the entire society. And we cannot say, well, my family is well protected, so I am not concerned.
That's not my business.
Because if we don't live,
we're not
exactly. No man is an island. Your child still has to go to the public
and interact with
and
other
even
kids.
when it is not the public education system, kids in all walks of life are affected by varying degrees of vulnerabilities, and your child could be impacted by the child sitting next to him or her because of what has happened to. So that is why we need to ensure that we assist one another throughout the process, call attention to the cases, make people understand that this is wrong. Too often we are silent, we accept jugement, we exalt persons that we know have been serious violators of children, and pretend that it does not happen. And all of these collectively have resulted in the situation that we are now. And that is why it needs to be addressed in a holistic manner. We have to see, where are we now? And how do we come back from this?
What are on our law books for those persons who harbor? That is it. $50.
$50?
$50.
A charge of $50?
Yep. If a child, let me just double check this, because I asked the question earlier. If a child has been harbored by an individual, and they have to, it's a minor, there's a charge of $50. And so the police are not going to waste resources to go and get a child that has been continuously running away. It's $50?
The charge to the perpetrator is $50.
$50.
Well, I think this is an area which urgently needs to be addressed, and the charge needs to be very, very, very high. And maybe that's why we seem to be having every now and then young people disappearing. So I think policymakers, if they are listening, should look at this as an area that needs to be addressed, and to increase the penalties, and certainly make it a serious crime to harbor children, because our children are our weakest link in any society. And if we cannot protect our children, what we must recognize is that all of this eventually becomes a cost for us as a society.
We have a call online. Thank you for calling Newsmaker Live with Laura. You on the air?
Yeah.
Okay, so you need to quickly turn off your television. Turn it off. Kill the cat. This
Hello?
is really hurting my ear. You need to
I
turn
want
off
to
your
ask,
television,
when
ma'am.
to school,
Ma'am, you need to turn
children
off
have
your
sex, is that a
television.
crime?
You need to turn off your television. Okay. Now
What
you
did
can
you
ask your question. Hello?
Hello?
Yes?
When two school children have sex, is that a crime?
When two children, school children have sex, is that a crime?
It is a crime to have
Thank you
sex
for
below
calling.
the age of consent.
If both of them are below the age of consent.
It is a crime, because
So
you
who
are
is
not.
charged?
It is a crime for children to have sex below the age of consent, and it is a criminal act.
So I am underage. I have sex with you. You're underage. We both underaged. Can
We
you
are-
charge? No, this is really curious to me because
It's actually a very interesting question, but the fact remains that it is not permissible by law. So whether it is perpetrated by a child of the same age or somebody who is older, a crime is a crime is a crime is a crime. It's a matter of how does the state deal with this.
So how
Because
does the
obviously the
state deal with
state
it?
would deal with an adult perpetrator in one manner, but the state would deal with those who are below the age in a different manner. But it is a crime to,
But
to
what-
go
how
you
do
cannot
they deal with
consent.
it?
You cannot consent to sex below the age of 16.
so how does the state deal with that?
Then the state has to, for example, if a child is a minor, you have to deal with that child as a minor. You cannot put a minor in an adult prison. You need to have systems.
So you mean that they will be detained?
Well, we have no detention facilities for kids.
So we really need some reform of our laws in this place.
Quite obvious.
So let me just, I was telling you, I was getting the response for that, the minor. The charge for harboring a minor is only, in capitalized letters, only $50. So in most cases, when reported, the police don't necessarily take it on because the charge is so little. And just about anyone can pay that. Now, if the child is being sexually abused by the person, then that's another story. But again, the children don't talk. And if they don't give a statement, then nothing can happen. So you could harbor a child, have sex with her, pay a fine of $50, and if the child never speaks and never says, you were having sex with me?
And that is why, Laura, we need to protect children so that they never, in the first place, end up in the company of a person who is not a parent, a person who is going to harbor them for the purpose of having sex. And here I come back to the society, because if that is happening, clearly, St. Lucia is so small. Whoever is harboring that child has a neighbor. Whoever is harboring that child has family. So we have a problem within the society. Why is it that anyone, whether it is your uncle, your mother, your brother, your dad, whatever, would you feel it is okay for that person to be living with a 12-year-old child? It means that something has broken down. We need to find a way. We need to find our way back, because, and that's why I'm saying it's not a silver. There's no silver bullet to answer this problem. It's a societal problem. We have been too complacent, and we almost tacitly endorse some of the things that go on by our silence. Anybody who is aware of a situation like that should not be comfortable. Why would you be comfortable? Because it's not your child?
Unfortunately, that really is the answer that we get a lot of the times. That it's not my child. I know where my child is, and a lot of the times, the children that they were saying that they know where they are committing or doing the things that they're not supposed to be doing right there in the house under their noses, and they're not aware.
And that is why I'm saying, Laura, this is not just an issue, even for all the systems that may not work perfectly in tandem together. Because at the end of the day, even if you have the best laws, and you have the best police force, and you have the best judiciary, if you have a society that is willing to sit tacitly by and endorse sexual abuse of minors, and everybody is going to stay quiet, how is the justice system supposed to work? So we have to look at this thing in a wholesome way. It's not just one response. It's not just one solution. It's a collective solution, and that's why we need to look at it in a way, consider behavioral change, consider finding a way to reverse the trend of where we are now. Why we would think that this is happening to this child, so it won't affect me. It will affect all of us. It affects the economy of the country as well, because when one child falls through the cracks and people do nothing about it, they assume it would not affect them. But when that child contracts HIV and that child doesn't have the economic ability to deal with it, that child becomes a ward of the state. When that child continues to be abused by older men who should know better, not knowing that child has HIV, he would bring HIV home to the wife. And so we need to be our brothers and our sisters' keeper, and not necessarily just point fingers on everything and say this is where the system has broken down. It has broken down with all of us. And for any neighbor who is comfortable to know that a grown man is harboring a 12-year-old child and having sex with that child, something is wrong with us.
Fundamentally, eh?
Something is seriously wrong with us.
It's a societal problem.
Exactly.
And it says that there may be other monsters living in that area as well. This is all the time we have. So the conversation still continues for the next 16 days. We are asked to paint our communities, our towns, our villages, our societies orange. Please do something. If you hear something, speak up. If you see something, speak up. If you know something, speak up. Our very existence, our very society, our children, and our future depend on you and me, on us speaking up. See you next time.
It's a chronic problem, violence against women and children. We must solve this chronic problem, violence against women and children. Ooh, na 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 na. Oh, oh, oh. No, 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 no. It's a chronic problem, violence against women and children. We must solve this chronic problem, violence against women and children. Too many victims of rape, too many perpetrators escape, too many women are battered and killed, too many cases are unsolved still. Remember decision makers, remember women's lives matter. Remember decision makers, remember that women's votes matter. Remember decision makers, remember that women's lives matter. Remember decision makers, we'll show you that women's votes matter. We're tired of all the excuses about this and that and lack of resources. Women and children must feel secure through the length and breadth of St. Lucia. While we get abused, it's no time for gimmick. We're tired of all the talk and rhetoric. This issue can't be on the back burner while women get raped and killed in St. Lucia. Remember decision makers, remember that women's lives matter. Remember decision makers, remember that women's votes matter. Remember decision makers, remember that women's lives matter. Remember decision makers, we'll show you that women's votes matter. Raise your voice, say no to the raping. Raise your voice, say no to the battering. Raise your voice, say no to abusing. Raise your voice, raise your voice. Raise your voice, say no to the raping. Raise your voice, say no to the battering. Raise your voice, say no to abusing. Raise your voice, raise your voice.